With the release of Horizon Forbidden West on the horizon, pun fully intended, I've been looking for a means to creatively vent my excitement for this game. It's the highly anticipated sequel to a game I absolutely loved. Conveniently, that first game, Horizon Zero Dawn, has an anniversary coming up. On the 28th of February, it will officially be 5 years since this game released. So I wanted to do a video to mark the 5-year anniversary of Horizon Zero Dawn. Though, truth be told, it is going to be a little early because I want it out before the 18th of February so I can focus my efforts on playing Horizon Forbidden West. And that's what today's video is, a look back on Horizon Zero Dawn to see why it's so great, at least in my opinion, both in anticipation for the upcoming sequel and also just because this game is now closing in on 5 years old. There's so much to love about this game, its world is so unique, the lore is so rich, the characters are unforgettable, the protagonist, Aloy, has the perfect coming-of-age story for a world that doesn't understand itself. We get this sense of discovery around every corner, and of course we get to fight giant robot dinosaurs, so what's not to like? So please enjoy this video looking back on Horizon Zero Dawn, 5 years later. Well, almost. In order to properly be injected into this new world, this new universe if you will, we needed a vessel, and this game hits the mark astonishingly with Aloy. We first see Aloy before the main menu as a child, where she's given her name by her guardian Rost in a ritual. Rost is an outcast of the Nora people, and therefore the naming is technically against the tradition, as Aloy is an outcast by birth due to her lack of a mother. Despite this, one of the High Matriarchs, Tirsa, does bless the naming, therefore it is technically legal. However, this is how the game introduces us to the fact that Aloy is born an outcast and is therefore shunned by society, through the cruel words of another matriarch named Lancera. This scene plays before the main menu once, which is a bit of a critique because you can never watch it again and it feels kinda crucial, but whatever. We are then reintroduced to Aloy as a young girl. She's watching the Nora tribe's children pick berries and present them to a woman. Aloy decides to try this for herself but is distressed when she's met with scorn. Aloy doesn't understand why she's not accepted and crushes the berries and runs off. We see her emotion here, she's upset and confused, which makes her angry. She stumbles and falls into a ruin of the Old Ones, an ancient society of humanity that is long gone. In searching for a way out, she comes across a device known as a focus that shows her things from the past but also helps her navigate to an exit, where Rost is waiting. Before we get onto that, I think it's fitting that the first thing the focus shows Aloy is a parent's love for their child. Despite Rost picking up the slack, this is a bond that Aloy never had, so this does interest her. In a way, this is the first time that Aloy experiences parental care, but it's a recording from 1,000 years ago. This creates an instant attachment between Aloy and the focus because it instantly shows Aloy what she's missing. Anyway, like I said, Rost finds Aloy. I'm not entirely sure how he knows she's down there, but fair play to him. Rost is naturally cautious of the focus, believing in Nora superstition himself, but despite that, he lets her keep it. This is key because the focus is the vessel for the cure to ignorance in Aloy's case, and with all that we learn about Aloy's character even as a child, Rost may not be happy with letting Aloy keep the focus out of superstition, but he knows better than to attempt to take it from her. The following day, Rost takes Aloy out to learn to hunt. Considering Aloy likes to wander off, this is so that she can survive and even best machines. This is basically a tutorial, not much of it is particularly important right now, but this is where we come to grips with the actual gameplay of Horizon Zero Dawn, but I will be talking about that in a separate segment. In the process of learning to hunt, Aloy and Rost encounter a Nora brave who stumbles into a valley full of watchers, as well as striders, I think they're called, but that's besides the point. Aloy, before Rost can stop her, jumps in to help using stealth taught by Rost and the focus combined to evade the machines and rescue Teb, guiding him to safety. Teb attempts to thank Aloy but is quickly reprimanded by fellow Nora for doing so, reminding Aloy that she's a motherless outcast. Obviously this upsets Aloy as she doesn't understand why she's hated by a tribe she's never known. Shortly after, when Aloy is alone, a Nora child throws a stone at her, hitting her on the head and telling her cruelly to stay away, calling her no mother. He attempts to throw a second stone, which Aloy catches. This is where we're introduced to 3 different forms of approaches we can take with Aloy's personality. Aloy can be compassionate and drop the stone, thoughtful and aim for the child's wrist, knocking the next stone out of his hand, or aggressive and aim for his face. You can confront things directly, you can be insightful and look for a less obvious approach, or you can express your deepest convictions through compassion. I found myself opting for the intelligent route, chose to knock the rock out of Bast's hand. Regardless, Aloy is deeply hurt by this incident and in her built-up confusion asks Rost what she can do to find out who her mother is, and everything in her life so far has been shadowed by the fact that she doesn't have one. Rost tells her that when she was ready, if she ran in the proving, she'd be made a Nora brave and be an outcast no longer, but if she won, she'd be granted a boon where she'd be able to ask the High Matriarchs for the truth. But it would be very dangerous and take years of training. This gives Aloy purpose despite being shunned by Nora society simply for existing. This cues the montage for the years of training where we see Aloy go from a small child to, well, Aloy, now fully trained over the years by Rost, and finally ready to take on the proving. We take control of Aloy now at roughly 19 years of age, a couple of days shy of the event she's been training her entire life for. When Aloy arrives at Mother's Heart, the Nora capital, to run in the proving, she is intimidated by the noise and the amount of people present, not being accustomed to it in all her 19 years of living. Despite her anxiety, her distress mostly comes from her confusion regarding Rost's decision to disappear. Once she's made a brave, she will no longer be legally allowed to even speak with Rost, and Rost tries to make this process easier by suggesting he vanish altogether, but this isn't exactly what Aloy wants. However, for now she's got to focus on what she's trained her entire life to do, finish first in the proving and get the answers she seeks. But it shows that Aloy cares about Rost over the Nora. After all, what has the tribe ever done for her? But the answers she can only get through winning the proving are too important to her to let go of now. Aloy is greeted by Teersa, the matriarch who blessed her naming as an infant despite it going against tradition, and welcomed into Mother's Heart, despite the best efforts of the Gates guards to deny her. The sights, sounds and experiences around Mother's Heart are rich and atmospheric. This is new to us, and due to Aloy's social standing up until this point, new to her as well. We're learning with Aloy, and that's what makes the introduction of this world so brilliant. What we learn, she's learning. What we don't know is what Aloy does not know either. The main protagonist is perfect for the story being told to introduce us to the lore of this new franchise. Anyhow, Aloy runs in the proving the following day, where the odds are against her. Due to her still being seen as an outcast to many, Bast, the kid who hurt Aloy all those years ago, shoots her trophy out of her hands, and the Invigilator, I suppose, tells her to get another one before she can continue, putting her at a disadvantage. Aloy does this, but is behind the others by some way. One of the many Nora along the path tells Aloy she may as well walk from here, but she only needs to finish to be made a brave. This is not enough for Aloy. Despite being warned of its dangers, she takes an abandoned path. This shows her determination to see her goals through. Aloy isn't going to let odds get between her and what she wants, or even what she needs. She successfully takes the dangerous trail and wins the proving. Despite being called a cheater by Bast, she broke no laws and therefore finished first in the proving, which is confirmed by the proctor at the end of the trail. I suppose this decision making calls back to the choices that we made before. It's not relevant, however the 3 choices are based on 3 different assets that Aloy has as part of her personality, and in this situation she used the intuition. While this instance isn't a choice, it just shows that Aloy is all of these things. Anyway, before anything else can happen, the Nora are attacked by a mysterious band of what appear to be cultists. They are merciless and kill the young braves without hesitation. Aloy fights back and despite this is injured. Rost comes to save her life, fighting off the seeming leader of this cult, and pushes Aloy off of the cliff before an explosion kills him. Aloy somehow survives falling off of a cliff. I'm not entirely sure how Ross thought that was a good idea, and awakens in the heart of the mountain at Mother's Heart, where she discovers an ancient door which, according to Teersa, is where she was found. According to the superstitions of the Nora, she was born from the mountain, but Aloy knows instantly that it's a door, not a goddess as believed by the matriarchs. However, the Alpha Registry required to access what's behind the door has been corrupted, and so fixing that needs to be a priority before it can be opened. Doing this means Aloy must venture out into the broader world to find the answers, which leads us into the bulk of the story, which we'll pick up with later on in the video. For now, she's promoted to Nora Seeker by the matriarchs, which allows her to come and go from Nora lands and beyond as she pleases, which grants her the freedom necessary to find the answers and heal the corruption, as Teersa believes the door is actually the goddess telling her to do this. Reason why Aloy knows more than the Nora do, even though we're so early on in the story, is because of her limited Nora influence growing up and the fact that her main source of information on the old ones has come from the focus she's used since she was 6 years old. So in a world full of all different cultural beliefs about what happened in the past and why everything is the way it is now, Aloy is shackled to none of them, and the game establishes this as early as possible. Sorry for the long-winded introduction of the story, but I wanted to get into the bulk of the character in a more organic setting. And so, to top off this chapter of the video, I wanted to give a little bit of a rundown. Aloy's character is determined, skilled, and willing to give everything she has to find out where she came from and the truth behind it. She's open-minded and caring for those around her. She can be compassionate, hardy, and thoughtful depending on dialogue choices, though sometimes those are out of her hands. There are no skill checks behind this, it just depends entirely on how you wish to approach the choices when they present themselves, but Aloy's core character is all of these things, where necessary at the very least. Aloy's ability to think outside of the norm due to a lack of societal influence growing up leads her to better understand the truth behind humanity's current existence and why the world is the way it is better than almost anyone else. This is a character who fits in the world but doesn't belong to any one people. She's not a Nora really, she doesn't belong with the Nora, she knows that, a lot of the Nora know it, and everyone else certainly knows it. Aloy is a trailblazer, hardened by a childhood of unfair hardship and humbled by her somewhat stable upbringing besides, and that's the perfect basis for a main character within the story being told. Aloy's story is about coming of age, it's about discovery of her own significance and the threat that looms over all life on Earth. The world of Horizon Zero Dawn is an absolute treat. Set in the distant future, roughly 1,000 years after the collapse of human society as we might know it, humanity has reverted to a tribal stage, except the land is now dominated by aggressive machines modelled after animals and dinosaurs and all sorts really. Science went on a mad one. How all this came to be is a massive mystery integral to the narrative. How is all of this happening? And that's a big part of the grander story, and Aloy needs to decipher it, which means there's plenty of room for world building as we explore the lore of this universe. There's plenty of lore to be found in the world space that fills many blanks. Sometimes it's unimportant stuff that serves no purpose other than to remind you of the world that was. Other times it directly relates to the main story or even a side story in the present. But it's always nice to hear an audio recording or read into some lore and discover how it all fits into the broader experience. We also get to see the current takes on the world through the different tribes' beliefs. The Nora believe in a goddess known as the All-Mother, whereas the Kaja, for example, worship the sun as their god, or something along those lines. The game is an interesting commentary on religious beliefs. I wouldn't say it's controversial, but within the context of Horizon, we know that there are no gods. These are just interpretations to fill in the blanks of what people do not currently understand. All there is the world that once was, the still functioning machines and facilities left behind by the ancient human civilizations, and through Aloy's journey we discover the fate that befell humanity. A glitch in tech giant Ted Faro's biomass-consuming self-replication machine sent them rogue and rendered the Earth completely barren, and through Zero Dawn, Elizabeth Sobek managed to organise a means for life to one day live again. Come the events of the main game, this is in full swing, and so humanity went the full way to extinction and back again, for lack of a better explanation. And to me, that premise is interesting. The world wasn't saved from impending doom, it had to endure it, which explains how humanity has reverted to a more tribal existence, and it has to face that again. but this time survive. The fate that befell the old ones in the Horizon lore feels like another message. Humanity's curiosity and obsession with assisting our own evolution through science may in fact lead to our downfall. Though I won't run away with these messages, it is after all just a game. But it's an interesting point, and if a fictional world makes you think about the real one, then that's a point. It's both immersion, but it's also kind of hard-hitting. Like I said, Horizon is rich with lore on machines, humanity, the old and the new, and as you explore and experience the story, whether you're on the main story quest or a simple side quest or even a mere errand, you're always learning something, and that's why the world of Horizon Zero Dawn feels so rewarding. Off of that, Horizon's world is also diverse visually. To the east you have the green forest lands and snowier areas. To the west you've got warmer climates, a desert-like region, the Karja Sundom, dotted with lush, vibrant oases. The regions have different cultures and beliefs. You can see the differences in lifestyles and architecture. For example, there's not a single similarity between Mother's Heart and Meridian. Mother's Heart is somewhat akin to a tribal mega-village with a simplistic approach to life. Meridian is a city and it feels like one. It's populated, culturally diverse, open to outlanders. The towers are tall and it's easier from the perspective of a player to get lost in it. Despite being different in every single way, these places have one thing in common. They're all amazingly well made to suit their purposes, and there will always be something else to discover about them. There's so much depth and detail to the world of Horizon Zero Dawn, and it's no bigger than it needs to be. Everywhere and everything can carry its rewards if you see fit to go there and find out. And so if there's one point to take away about the world of Horizon, let it be this: every second spent in it felt worthwhile. I'll delve deeper into the exploration aspect later on in the video and cover side content and the like there, but for now the main takeaway is that the Horizon universe is atmospheric and lived in, both past and present. There's room for more lore, granted, but that's the purpose of the upcoming sequel, I don't doubt. To round all of that up, Horizon Zero Dawn's world is full of lore, atmosphere and culture, robot dinosaurs and the beautiful blend of science fiction and fantasy. It has a unique flavour, and that's what really makes any game world, or game in general, stand out. The determining factor for how much I like RPGs such as this often stems from the atmosphere and world building. I ask myself, do I want to spend time in this world? Do I want to learn about it? Am I curious? Do I feel like I can fit in with it? And if the answer is yes, I'll wind up sinking as many hours into it as the game allows me to before it runs out of content. And because Horizon's no bigger than it needs to be, I know that's not going to eat up my entire life. I want to experience the world of Horizon Zero Dawn. That's why I think it does this so flawlessly. So, if Forbidden West expands on this element, I'll be happy. Because in the case of this game, what's the point in an end of the world plot if I don't care about the world? And this game gives you simply a bucket load of reasons to care. Naturally, you have the story being told, the main protagonist Aloy, the lore, the side characters you meet and the quests and adventures you have along the way, which I'll touch down upon later on in the video, especially in the category of RPGs like Horizon sort of is, though I'd argue there's an element of action-adventure to it. Making you care is what immerses you in the experience, and it uses various tools to do this, and a lot of them are extensions to the world, because the world is the setting, and therefore it's almost the most crucial part, because everything has to exist within it. And that's why it's so important that Horizon Zero Dawn nails this beautifully the way it does. Horizon Zero Dawn's narrative, as I mentioned previously, has a heavy focus on being something of a coming-of-age story for Aloy, but that's not all it is. The story is unique and it feels like it's fed by its world's lore and the other way, feeds into the world's lore. I don't plan to talk through the entire narrative because you can just play the game for that, so I won't defeat my own points with dilution. In Aloy's journey to discover the truth, she discovers that the world is facing a greater threat than she could have imagined, and Aloy is the only one who's properly awakened to it and equipped to stop it, due to her established character traits of being highly trained by Rost and also having limited cultural influence from the Nora, due to being an outcast growing up. This journey takes Aloy out of Nora lands into the wider world, where we learn more about this world and how it works, how the machines work and why, what happened to the human civilizations of old, and so on. one. It's a story that serves to aid the world building just as much as the world building is there to aid the story, and that's what makes the narrative of this game so gripping. But more importantly, on the immersion side of things, it makes it feel believable because you do not feel as if the world exists purely to tell this story. The story is very important to the survival of this world, but it doesn't feel as if the world is just a backdrop for the storytelling to happen. While it's a game world and it kind of is there for that purpose, it's also an RPG where immersion is essential, and so believing the world that you're in is key. This narrative isn't just a coming-of-age story, and it isn't just an end-of-the-world plot. It's about everything. You're exposed to the world that is threatened, and because you have that exposure, it feels more urgent and immersive. And Aloy provides an emotional anchor because we can empathise with her. We know her story, where she's from, and why discovering the truth is important to her, and that springboard is useful when it comes to relating to the rest of the story. You feel Aloy's pain when you discover the answers that she seeks aren't as straightforward as she would have liked, but her motivation to push on doesn't waver because she discovers she's got a greater purpose. She's a genetic clone of Elizabeth Sobek, a reincarnation if you will, birthed from an advanced AI known as Gaia, to prevent one of its subordinate functions from destroying the world after going rogue, and that is probably the shittest explanation you've ever heard of that. Aloy's story is about discovering that she is more than the answers she desires, and while the truth is painful, she exists for a greater purpose, and that purpose is simply put to save all life on Earth. It's kind of a tragedy for the character, as at every turn there are more questions than answers, but the truth is far more rewarding from the perspective of a player because now it means we have to literally save the world, and it makes sense. We worked hard to find the truth, and the truth feels significant, and it feels important, and it feels like it has a purpose narratively and in gameplay. And so regardless of if the answers were what Aloy sought, the truth gets discovered, and there is indeed a payoff after the fact. It's now about more than just Aloy as a character, and I feel like in video games especially, that can be very important. Regardless of how important a character is, especially in RPGs where we immerse ourselves in these worlds so much, it's important that the story goes beyond just that character, because in the end of the day, despite quality, the character needs to be a vessel for us to experience this world, this universe, this lore. But when the character is established as their own personality, it is indeed a balancing act, and Horizon Zero Dawn does this fantastically. On another note, the characters you meet along the way are memorable. Erend externally presents himself as a typical Oseram, a fighter, a drinker, a bold man proud of his heritage. However, beneath that, he's absolutely jammed with negative emotion and self-loathing. Erend often speaks without thinking, which can lead to some rather interesting dialogue, and is just a fun character to be around because despite his hardy exterior, he's a man struggling to live up to the high standards set by his sister, which is interesting to explore. Then you have Varl. Despite being a firm believer in the ways of the Nora, Varl is a man willing to break tradition where necessary, which makes him stand out from the other Nora who often don't break tradition at all, and that's an interesting topic to touch down on. He's also one of the first true friends that Aloy makes on her journey. As a final example, there's only one character fitting, and this one may just be the deepest side character of them all. Sylens. Sylens is a cynical, mysterious, well-spoken, intellectual character with a blunt answer to everything. Relentlessly dedicated to pursuing knowledge, Sylens is unrestricted by morality. He doesn't value human emotions, often wording things in deliberately cruel manners to elaborate his point. Sylens is an ally in Horizon Zero Dawn, however everything about him presents an aura of untrustworthiness. He's using Aloy to further his own knowledge, and that much is obvious, at least until the apocalyptic revelation forces him to function as an ally and delay any self-interest for the time being. This is a character we will absolutely see again in the future and learn more about him, and somehow I doubt it'll be necessarily as an ally, at least not all of the time, and that I absolutely love about this character. He's packed with mystery, self-interest, and does some shady shit that makes me believe he's going to have a grander purpose in the Horizon story going forward. All the layers to this character make him so fascinating. You know he's got his own angle, and yet due to his secretive nature, we do not know what exactly that angle is. All we know is it probably isn't going to align with Aloy's in the end. Sylens is perhaps one of the most interesting aspects to the entire narrative of Horizon so far, so it was well worth bringing up his obvious significance going forward, as we know he's going to be in Forbidden West, Whether as an antagonist or an anti-hero, or even as an ally, I don't know, but I'm keen to find out. Beyond his mystery, Sylens also has an interesting function in the narrative of Horizon Zero Dawn, being another character who, like Aloy, is unrestricted by the cultural beliefs of the tribes of the era, and is therefore another character capable of understanding the truth behind the machines and the world itself. And that second take on things can be very insightful, even if, or even especially if, the character providing them is fundamentally a dickhead. The characters of Horizon Zero Dawn all add their own qualities, and that combines into the quality of the overall story, because the destination, as significant as that might be, isn't as important from the perspective of the player as the journey, and this game offers a brilliant journey through these characters. Furthermore, another positive in the story section has to be its length. The story isn't too long, maybe 15 to 20 hours worth tops. That's a nice concise narrative. Sometimes there's a bit of a leveling curve before you can comfortably do the next mission, but the leveling system is balanced so it doesn't take that long at all, and often this can feel like a nice opportunity to go and do some side content around where you are, and it doesn't eat up too much time or take you too far afield. There's also optional extras to the main story, such as helping Olin save his family, and little things like that which aren't really time limited, and they just become side content. It feels right to do them, but you aren't forced to go off the beaten path in order to do so. The game understands it doesn't have to be 100 hours long to be a successful RPG, and that's best reflected in how long it takes to finish the main questline. It's an indicator of several things. The game is no longer than it needs to be, it's also no bigger than it needs to be, and the vast majority of optional extra side content is going to be worthwhile because the game isn't bloated, and it only needs a relatively concise main story in order to convince you to go and do it, which is rare to see in an RPG, especially in the last few years. I guess what I'm trying to say is Horizon Zero Dawn is an antithesis to a Ubisoft game. To conclude, the narrative provides emotional connection, high stakes to ensure a feeling of urgency and importance to what we're doing, and original storytelling that sets it apart from other games. By that I mean the premise of robot dinosaurs versus tribespeople in the year 3040. Come to think of it, that sounds funny, but it's actually really well put together and stands out. Horizon's characters are all unique and interesting. The story has mystery, ambiguity, discovery, self-discovery. It takes us to a variety of places, and we experience different worlds almost, in the cultures of the people who inhabit them, and all of that is condensed into a nicely rounded 20-hour experience. So, of course I loved Horizon Zero Dawn's main story, because what's not to like? Beyond the main story content, the side content is important too. Horizon Zero Dawn doesn't oversaturate itself with pointless fetch quests and errands, though there's an entire category of side quests dedicated to errands for organization's sake, but even then they aren't the tiresome fetch quests you might have seen in other RPGs that go something along the lines of "Almighty hero, go here and collect 5 wood so I can build myself a bigger wood. I will repay you with 5 XP and 2 gold, oh mighty hero." I don't know what that accent was either. No, what's so important about Horizon Zero Dawn is that the side content feels worthy of us. The side quests all have stories worth experiencing, there's lore to learn, machines to kill, which is a bit of a mission in itself sometimes, and plenty of things that can be done to define one quest from the next. When the side content quality in open world games is poor, it tells me that the company behind the development of the game couldn't give 2 shits about the world that they're building, about the world building in itself, or the open world at all. It's just there to inconvenience you. Horizon doesn't do this. Horizon's open world feels crafted with care and imagination. The characters we meet in side quests are unique, they have their own charms and aren't copy-pasted procedurally generated NPCs like you might expect from some games. There's plenty of quality to be had, and engaging in the content outside of the main questline is instantly rewarding, as you don't need to do much to level up, as XP is earned pretty easily. The side content is well organised as well. Bigger side quests go into the side quest category of the menu, where you can easily identify what has more substance. The tutorial quests have their own category. The errands are there if you fancy doing them, though, like I said, sometimes these aren't dissimilar in quality to regular side quests, but are just a bit shorter or something along those lines. Other times they are just errands, but they have their own rewards. Hunting trials and corrupted zones have their own categories too, as do cauldrons, and you get the point. The menu is well organised and doesn't mislead you into doing pointless shit, categorising content in order of importance. And where that doesn't apply, what it's important to. This way you can see how well organised the open world's content actually is, because you know what kind of content you're getting yourself into before you do very much of it. So if you're not interested in, say, clearing bandit camps, well, maybe you could go do this tool neck. Nice, easy content that's gonna give you loads of experience so you can get on with the main story. It also gives the benefit of unfogging the map, which makes exploration easier. And there's not too many of them, so it's not like some Ubisoft game where there's an overwhelming amount of everything and it's all the same boring stuff. I've noticed I've done a lot of Ubisoft bashing in this video, and it's not even about a Ubisoft game. I don't even apologise. I feel like while we're here, the tool necks are a great example of what Horizon Zero Dawn does to set it apart from other games. It's a creative take on a viewpoint mechanic. There's only so many, so it's not stupidly overwhelming with the amount you have to do. They're machines, they're moving about, so you have to catch them at the right time in order to get on and climb them. It's not too tedious, as there are several points where you can hop on, so you don't have to wait for them to come around again. And sometimes you can't, because there will be other machines that might cause you issues if you linger. And they look incredible from a distance, so it's quite fun to watch them go. They're probably the only truly docile machines you'll come across, just don't stand in their way or they will trample you. And they even have an explained in-lore purpose for existing. At its core, a tool neck functions as a viewpoint mechanic, however, they're interesting, which makes it okay. There's plenty of other stuff to do as well. Sometimes you may happen upon a corrupted zone or a hunting trial, and it's up to you as to whether or not you do them. You aren't required to. The leveling is quite easy going in Horizon, so there's no obligation to do as much content as you can find to even stand a chance at keeping up with the leveling curve of the main content. You could ignore it all if you wish, or you could do some of it, or you could do all of it. The fact that the decision is yours makes completing side content more rewarding because you chose to do it and there was nothing telling you that you had to. Another fun piece of content you may come across are cauldrons. This sees you delve into the factories that made the machines and grants you the rewards of allowing you to override the machine types constructed in the specific cauldron. And so you're rewarded by the game making your life easier because you chose to explore that cauldron. They can be quite challenging as well, which is pretty fun because the machines can be quite tricky beasts. However, they aren't damage sponges, though at first they may seem like it, because there's a trick to taking every single machine down. But whether you simply wail on them or figure that out is completely up to you. So delving into a cauldron can be a nice way to get a bit of a challenge, if that's what you seek, but at no point does it become mandatory to go into one. Hunting trials can also be a pretty fun way to kill some time, rack up some experience, and even do a side quest revolving around those. There's a variety of different trials that challenge you in different ways, so they can be good fun too. Another thing I found worth doing was going out of my way to acquire power cells found in main story locations to acquire the Shield Weaver armor, which is a pretty overpowered piece of kit that doubles Aloy's health. The armor, however, recovers its half of the health, and so getting it felt like a huge advantage, which made it rewarding, as that armor at times can save your life against overwhelming attacks, which is another example of investing time into the game outside of the main story content paying off. And you don't really have to go too far out of your way in order to do it, because the power cells can be acquired optionally through main story missions, besides from the first one, which requires you to return to where Aloy fell into the ruins as a child, but you get my point. To get the best armor in the game, you've just got to play through the vast majority of the main story, and just be extra observant as you do, rather than grind an ungodly amount of hours doing stuff that's so far out of your way that you wonder why you even bothered. There are also collectibles that can be sold to special traders in exchange for unique items, which is a nice reward for doing that, but even in Horizon, dashing about grabbing collectibles aren't really something I often delve into, so they aren't something I've ever explored in much depth, but it's there and it's cool, I guess. But if I ever do happen to have the items required, I know those traders will have something worth my while. So in reality, there's a variety of rewards that can come from engaging in the side contents, whether that be a stupendous amount of experience so you can level up, so you can acquire skill points, items you can sell to traders for gear or loot, or a great narrative payoff to a side story that really gripped you. And sometimes it can be a good combination. Another entertaining thing about exploring this world is the fact that you'll notice every other male Oseram NPC is voiced by Geralt of Rivia. I understand this was meant to be a subtle Easter egg, but it's really the furthest thing from it.
Thinking about heading back to the plane. You look fresh from the forge. I'm not trading today. Let me tell you, a woman like care, wouldn't care.
Don't forget to stock your
Go lost. What do you want from me?
Not the town crowd.
Out these way.
You look like you can handle yourself.
Fine goods for a fair price.
sale, I
Make two of you. I work hard and
Fine
fight
goods
hard.
for a fair price.
Don't forget easy.
I've got
I'm sure you can
Won't find better wares.
Us around don't always take kindly to strangers.
Come take a look.
Winds howling.
On the whole, there's a nice well-sized world space ripe with lore and things to do that comprises Horizon Zero Dawn's side content. It's a pleasure to explore. It never feels like I'm in this world only to grind for hours. This is a game you could both binge an unhealthy amount of hours into in one sitting, or simply only sink a couple of hours here and there, and come away feeling as if your progress has been rewarding just the same. There are interesting characters behind every story, unique encounters and new information to be learned, and none of it feels like it's wasting your time. Horizon Zero Dawn respects the player's time, and that's an important aspect to any open world game. Every second spent playing this game was because I wanted to, not because I had to in order to get to the content I wanted to do, and to me, that's brilliance. Is the side content of this game without its flaws? No, of course not. Sometimes the side quest cutscenes can be a little bland, and the same can apply to some main quests, with many simply being comprised of over-the-shoulder dialogue shots. But I'm hoping Horizon Forbidden West will mix that up, and it really doesn't take away from the experience too much, if at all. So overall, the conclusion is Horizon Zero Dawn's exploration and side content on the whole is nicely well-rounded with different forms of content that can keep you playing this game because you want to, rather than because you feel like you have to. The gameplay of Horizon Zero Dawn is fun. I can go into more depth than that, and I will, but that's my opening statement, I suppose. The game has third-person action-adventure/RPG game controls with some neat climbing elements, so there's that, and I'm making this sound way less fun than it is, so I'll get to the meat of it. The place where Horizon Zero Dawn's gameplay thrives is its combat. Against human enemies it can be a little bit hit and miss, however when facing machines this game plays like a dream. Machines come in all different shapes and sizes and difficulties, and it's up to you as to how you figure out how to take them down. For an edge, you can scan the enemy machine with your focus and see their weaknesses and what can be best used to deal damage to that particular component. The game does have a melee combat system, however it's not really the combat's focus. The main focus is primarily the archery, the use of projectiles in combat on the whole. Primarily you're going to find yourself using your bow and different types of arrows depending on what the circumstances demand to deal the vast majority of damage in this game. Aiming for weak spots deals more damage, and the combat is really all about exploiting a machine's weaknesses, destroying components and exposing weaker spots deals more damage when you hit what's beneath, and sometimes you can deal massive amounts of damage by hitting sweet spots such as a watcher's eye or a canister on the back of certain enemy archetypes, with an arrow type required to set it off. For example, an explosive canister on the back of a machine, when hit directly by a fire arrow, will explode and deal a ton of damage. Sometimes even with these advantages, enemy machines can often be tricky to take down, and whoever came up with the fire claws in the Frozen Wilds expansion has a cruel heart to say the least, but the system still functions quite nicely. As you progress through the game, the machines you may come across can get bigger and scarier until before long you're facing behemoth machines in seemingly overwhelming fights, but even then there's a trick to it. If you knock off a machine's weapons, for example, sometimes you can pick those up and use them against the machines you're fighting. This will deal a lot of damage and help shortcut even the longest of fights. These big fights do take a while, but like I said, you're not slowly hacking and slashing for the entire thing, as you still got to be somewhat methodical in what you're doing. You can wing it, and I honestly prefer to do it this way, as I can't say I plan things out before fighting a Mega Death Velociraptor robot, but it's not a hack and slash fight either way, and the enemies that take a while to beat feel like things that would take that long. As you get used to fighting particular enemy types, you become much more efficient. Knowing what to aim for and what to use to bring down the machine and what tools are at your disposal that are going to be useful and what's not going to be so useful. As you fight these enemies, you gain the knowledge as the player to know what to do to take them down in the future, and so facing them becomes less of a challenge. On the fly, you can collect resources such as flowers that you can eat to restore health mid-fight, health potions and the like, and wood and metal shards in order to craft more arrows alongside machine parts from the corpses of the machines you've defeated to craft more complex arrows. Or sell for metal shards, which double up as the in-game currency for trading. All you need to do is whack open your weapon wheel and craft ammunition from there, so you don't have to faff with the pause menu mid-fight like you do in another game, for example. I'm not going to mention. Crafting mid-fight is a weird system because technically it doesn't make sense, but Horizon does it in a way that causes minimal disruption to the flow of combat, and it ensures you look for the resources you need to take on fights. Like I said, the game's primary focus is projectile-based combat, whether that be using your bow, a tripcaster, a ropecaster, a slingshot, or even a heavy weapon temporarily picked up mid-fight, and the melee really isn't that complex. You have fast light attacks and slow heavy attacks that can do damage and stagger your foes if timed right. Then if your enemy is staggered, you can use a critical hit to do tons of damage, and then you can use stealth attacks with your spear. For the most part it's alright, but I do sometimes wish there was a bit more flesh to the melee side of combat, and hopefully Horizon Forbidden West will address that at least partially. Another gameplay avenue is stealth. Stealth in Horizon Zero Dawn is very much so designed for avoiding enemies altogether, but you can time some nice stealth takedowns against smaller machines and human enemies as you go. Hide in long grass and use the focus to highlight an enemy's path in order to avoid it. It gets the job done, though often I found myself in a fight sooner or later anyway. Off the topic of combat, climbing often finds its uses in Horizon 2, with yellow markings where Aloy can climb up buildings, cliffs and tall necks and stuff like that. It's useful and definitely needed for a game where delving into ruins of ancient civilizations is a part of the package, considering, you know, I can't picture a world in which every ancient ruin has an intact staircase or ladder. And I always find the movements of climbing mechanics to be particularly satisfying, especially when you cannot climb everything, and it's a little bit of a puzzle in itself to get to the top of something. However, Horizon doesn't overcomplicate things, hence why everything you can climb is either yellow or orange, or otherwise obviously marked. The focus is important too, adding a sixth sense layer to the gameplay. A lot of games have some form of extra sense mechanic. The Witcher has Witcher senses, Assassin's Creed has Eagle Vision, or whatever it is now. I honestly don't care to keep up. Hitman has a sixth sense thing as well. It's hardly original, but it's useful. Horizon has the focus. The focus highlights important stuff, paths of enemies, important characters, and in combat can be used to highlight weak spots, though this at times can feel a bit like trying to read a book while somebody is blasting it with a leaf blower.
This is the hidden gem in the Quantop Hill! The Quantop Hill!
So the trick is to use that before you find yourself in combat, but you don't always have that luxury. So wing it. It can also be used to scan items and feed you lore on the fly. It's not the most original mechanic of all time, but it's purposeful. Knocking off machine components, getting kills and the like grants XP, which can also be granted by completing areas such as corrupted zones, cauldrons and bandit camps, alongside finishing quests. So there's no shortage of flows from which experience can come through, and it contributes towards leveling up, obviously, which will happen often. With the skill points earned from leveling up, you can invest into 4 different skill types. Prowler for the more stealthy players, though the skills are universally useful. Brave, which is more combat based, and that's very useful as you'll find yourself in combat a lot. Forager, which is for resource based skills that increase carry capacity, improvements to overrides and the like, and is pretty universally useful again. And then there's Traveller, which isn't dissimilar to Forager and is universally useful again and provides some neat skills that are definitely worth not sleeping on, which means that they're all worth investing in. Alongside this, leveling up increases your maximum health by 10 points a pop, which adds up over the course of the game and is handy by default because if you have more health you can take more hits, and when you can't take more hits you can certainly take harder ones. On top of this, sometimes skill points can be granted through finishing main quests or even at times side quests and other content if my memory serves me right. It's like a fish, it's like a goldfish, there's nothing really going on up there at the moment, especially now. And extra skill points are good because you can put those towards multi-point skills that require 2 or even 3 skill points to unlock, which you'll notice becoming more and more common as you progress further in the game. Off of that, you can go to merchants and buy better gear, supplies and stuff before you venture out and take down machines, or at least try, and you may come across coils which you can apply to weapons and armor to provide those gear pieces with buffs. These can go from mildly useful to incredibly useful, so it's well worth a shot in order to make sure your gear is as effective as possible. Another thing you can buy from merchants and craft are fast travel packs, which is a nice way to discourage fast travel as much as possible and yet still provide it for those times where you've got to trek all the way across the world map. When fast travel is easily available in games like Skyrim or The Witcher 3 for example, eventually you'll find yourself fast travelling all over, so once you've explored an area enough, you kind of forget about the fact that it's there at all, and that there's all this space yet to be checked out, and so you don't. In a game that has a system to limit how much or how often you can fast travel in an unrestricted way that requires you to play the game to bypass, this is less of an issue. You can fast travel provided you have the fast travel pack, and there's no limit to how many times you can fast travel in a playthrough. There is just a cost to it. It makes you weigh up if it's worth just hitting the loading screen or actually experiencing the world between points A and B. The gameplay on the whole is a nicely balanced experience, especially as you adjust to it and face off against some hefty machines using your bow, your focus and your wits to survive. After a while it feels like you've gained some skill through playing the game. It isn't unforgiving, but it isn't forgiving either depending on the difficulty selected. In my case, this was normal, and that well-rounded difficulty setting allowed me to feel the challenge and the satisfaction of not being stuck because it was right for me. And the gameplay worked, and because I understood it already this time going in, I didn't find myself feeling frustrated at any point. Overall, Horizon's gameplay is really enjoyable. You can adjust the challenge to suit what you want from it, and it feels rewarding even when hard, because when you peel back the experience, the narrative and anything else, the gameplay is fun, and taking down a monstrosity of a machine that towers above you is satisfying in itself, because you used the tools at your disposal to do that, and it could have so easily gone the other way. The rest of the gameplay clicks nicely with what Horizon Zero Dawn is going for, so it makes it a really enjoyable time. I feel like this is also the appropriate time to mention, kind of out of any particular chapter of this video, as in a positive video piece it's not really worth attempting to segment. There are no microtransactions in sight, no external purchasing of in-game content, no time savers, nothing. The game doesn't need them. Bearing in mind this game released around the beginning of the time where AAA games would start to absolutely dilute their games and sell XP boosts, weapons and cosmetics on the in-game stores, bought with more real money, and while I'd never appreciate a game for showing the bare minimum of respect for a consumer's money by not abusing their games for the sake of making extra money, I think it plays into a reason why I like this game so much. It's a game. It doesn't want to be more than that. It doesn't want more than what you paid for it, and it's one DLC. Its content isn't nerfed to make some external store appealing. It's simply just easygoing gaming because it's pure. And that's becoming increasingly rare, and I hate that about the bastardized state of the games industry at the moment. So it's always refreshing to go back to a game that doesn't have that shit in it. And I have no clue if that will remain the case for Forbidden West, but I bloody hope so. When it comes to the DLC, we got the Frozen Wilds, a nice, short expansion story that takes place in a region called the Cut. It's overwhelmingly snowy, has its own problems, main story, side quests, and functions as a bit of an extra chapter before the end of the main game's story. It was obviously designed to challenge players, because the first thing you do when you arrive in the Cut is get attacked by a new monstrosity that rags you about the place. We get to see the Yellowstone volcano in the 31st century, which is pretty nice, and the visual beauty isn't the only thing this DLC gets to boast. There are new characters who are just as interesting as the characters from the main game. There's new lore to be learned, new adventures to be had, new quests, new things to do in the open world space, and there's a crazy woman banging on pipes. To cut a long story short, it's just more of the Horizon Zero Dawn I already love, so I really enjoyed playing the Frozen Wilds after I'd finished the main story, because it meant I was a higher level and I wanted to go in there and look cool, but I got my fair share of humblings. I liked learning about the lore of the Banuk, and this DLC also shared some interesting information on the mysterious character himself, Silence. I thought this was really cool world building, and replaying this expansion honestly just increased my hype for Forbidden West. I don't want to drag this chapter out because its positives are the same as the game we've already discussed over the course of the rest of this video, but this is a great and worthy narrative expansion that only adds to the lore and doesn't subtract from it, and I think that element of world building is what makes it so excellent. Horizon Zero Dawn is one of those games I'm glad I came back to. I think if anything it's increased my anticipation for the sequel in a healthy way. I'm more confident in the quality of this game having replayed it before the release of its sequel almost 5 years after its original launch, and it still holds up amazingly. It's a game of quality. The gameplay is fun, the narrative is compelling, and I feel emotionally invested in Aloy's character and want to see what comes next in her story. The world building and lore is incredible. The world of Horizon is one of many mysteries that intertwine with the storytelling masterfully, and I love how unique the end result is. The game is an honest, fun experience that I'm glad I've had multiple times now, and I'm optimistic for its future as a franchise. It seems as if Forbidden West is going to go down a similar route for most aspects for the game, and I'm cool with that, because the quality of this game is outstanding, so why wouldn't that one be? I look forward to seeing where this world goes next, where the story of Forbidden West takes Aloy and the other characters, how that expands on the world building and development of our understanding of what happened and what's going to happen next. I look forward to testing my grit against new machines, delving into new cauldrons, discovering new secrets, and just experiencing all of the stories yet to be told in the Horizon universe. Horizon Zero Dawn is one of my favourite games of last generation, and, no offence to God of War, is probably my favourite PlayStation 4 exclusive. Being able to sit back and play it at 60 frames per second on the PS5 only just highlighted to me just how much of a banger it actually is. And if this experience has shown me anything at all, it's that I simply cannot wait for Horizon Forbidden West. And it's just around the corner. Thanks for watching.